Purpose of this get together and sit down is to have a conversation around the photograph. I want to ask you questions about your process so we can share that with people in my audience.
Let me actually pull up the image. So I've got it here as a
Yeah, go to YouTube, search up Robbie P punching bag, and it should show up.
Oh yeah, there it is.
So I've got the image up in front of me as well. We spent quite a bit of time going through different locations and we settled on this one. So I was curious to know, what was it about this location that you were gravitating towards?
We surveyed a number of different locations in the western suburbs, and you brought me around under here. And immediately, the garbage and the rubble and everything that was scattered all over the place. And I really love the pylons of the bridge. Although in the image you don't necessarily capture so much of the bridge, there was this nice perspective receding to the distance. The rubble and the garbage that was already scattered all over the place in the vans. It was just immediately, as soon as I saw that, stories just started developing in my mind.
Yeah, I remember when we were looking at the locations and scouting things, I didn't have a song in mind yet for the project. And when we landed here, my cogs started turning in my brain, like, oh, this and that, and murder scene, and started to elaborate on that. And it was like a quick turnaround from finding the location to shooting it. What was it, 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
Yeah, I reckon it was about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it was probably about a couple of days in, and you talked about an idea of a homicide, police officer or something like that.
Make me to feel like a villain, like I did murders and killings. Soak up the blood with the linen, soak up the blood with the linen.
And then I just went, well, they had like the detective and the forensics photographer, kid watching on with his phone. It's so very, 2020 with, social media and yeah.
I remember when we first connected and you talked about, I think it was Gregory Crewdson.
Crewdson.
Yes.
So Gregory Crewdson, for those who don't know, is an American photographer who is well known for producing these very large, very elaborate tableau scenes. And as well as working on a movie, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, possibly, that someone on that set just sparked an idea in my head. Now, I knew of Gregory Crewdson before that, and I'd admired his work. And I kind of had thoughts of doing work like he does, tableaus and large setups, exteriors, but I hadn't done anything with it. And then it was on this film, a guy sort of prompted the thought in my head, and I came home, and then it was probably a few months later, I made an image, a big tableau, by a pool, which I just discovered this really cool location. And I made that and I'm like, wow, this really worked. I should do this again. And then I went ahead and made the image that's behind us. I made it there a few months later again. And I was like, this is really working. I need to do more of this. Unfortunately, about a month after I made that, we went into lockdowns, which really put sort of the kibosh on a lot of my desire to make more of these projects because it requires a lot of people, a lot of time. And for a lot of that period, it was just out of the question. I would say I'm heavily inspired by Crewdson, but quite clearly my work has taken a slightly different tack and a different look. I'm sort of combining a little bit of conceptual photographic posing kind of in it, rather than it being such beautifully classically posed tableaus as Crewdson creates. I would have had more if it hadn't been for the interruptions of the last couple of years. As far as this image for you, it was a great opportunity just to make another image, bring someone else into the creative process rather than just my own. It was like a commercial assignment, which I've done a lot of, working commercially for many, many years. Yeah, it was a cross between my own personal work and a creative commercial assignment.
That's excellent. I reckon it came out looking amazing. I know we had some issues with 1 or 2 flashlights not working appropriately. I guess that's what happens when we're working in the wild with no power points. We were running off batteries and generators, weren't we? Even my generator broke down right before we even got started.
Yeah, so shooting with this sort of stuff, with the packs that I use, the flash packs, they're really quite very large, very old flash packs, and they require a lot of power. So I need portable generators to run all of those because I have a very light, hungry camera system. I'm using a large format film camera, really, probably in the figure of 20 to 30 years old. And the lenses are probably, 30, 40 years old, quite possibly. Some of them would probably even date to the 80s, I think, at least as a lens design. And then I'm using a medium format digital back on the back of that film camera instead of using film. But I shifted around to several predetermined grid sort of locations to combine those images together into one very, very large pixel dimension image.
The splicing of the images, it's 9 different images you take with that large scale camera and stitch it together. Is that how it works?
That's right. Yeah, there's 3 rows of 3 images. Yeah, 3 rows of 3 images. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They're all overlapping. And mounting that on the back of the view camera gives me lots of potential with regards to lens movements. This is kind of getting into a fairly technical photographic side of the process, but it just opens a lot more potential for the photographer to compose, to get perspective correct, to get your focus just where you want it. It adds a lot of creative potentials, which a digital SLR or a camera that you hold in your hand simply can't achieve. It just can't. It can't do those things. So it gives me a much larger resolving capability than the largest commercially available digital camera today, which costs, you wouldn't get much change out of $100,000 to buy this sort of camera system in Australia. So I'm achieving a larger pixel resolution and the same color depth for 1/10 of the money. In making the image, it has its limitations. It's a little bit slow, but really it's not that much of a concern when you consider that I spend all day to create the setup. If it takes 5 minutes to make the image as opposed to going click once, it's not a big deal when I've already spent 12 hours putting everything together in front of the lens.
Yeah, because we rolled out there, it was like 12 o'clock and we didn't start shooting till 6 or 7 when the sun started to go down. And I noticed on the image, like, it looks darker than what it really was in real time in that day.
It was done pretty much after the sun had set in the sort of the hill behind this scene. But yeah, just through the use of the exposure triangle with the flashlighting, I'm able to control the light just as I want it. So I've lit the scene as if there is some artificial light there, lighting the scene for these officers. But in the background is just dusky light. Yeah, it's just through the use of this what's called the exposure triangle. So shutter speed or aperture, a better word to use, and then film sensitivity. And you're just balancing the ambient light with the flashlight to come into what I feel is the most appropriate balance for the scene.
Crazy thing is, like, the week before we started to shoot this, that pillar with the bloodstains, that was covered in graffiti, like the first reference image. And I just found it so serendipitous that they painted over it, and then we're shooting a couple days later. Because I think it's not so distracting as it would have been if we had that pillar blasted with graffiti all over. Hey Andy, I'm just down here at the location just to take some reference images as the sun goes down, and I'm just noticing that they've painted around the posts. So no more graffiti, but an open canvas for a lot of blood.
Having graffiti there certainly would have drawn the eye away from the central sort of point of interest, as in like what's going on underneath that sheet. And that's the first thing I want you to see, is like that, and then let your eye wander around the frame and find the rest of the story, but keep coming back to that. And so it is kind of advantageous that there wasn't something bright and colourful and just distracting, drawing your attention right over to there, which is not a part of the story. Although there's some blood we put there on the wall. Again, it's like it's one of those little things your eye looks around and you go, well, why is there blood on the wall?
Yeah.
What has happened here that there is blood all over the wall?
Ominous thing about it is standing on top of the van with the guitar with blood all over myself, and then that just raises more questions of what happened there in that storytelling.
This resentment builds inside me and I feel like I'm distressed. I'm not managing, I'm panicking, I'm projecting my stress. So pick up these pieces, body parts found in the ground. How will you feel when the world comes tumbling down?
Yeah, so I like to leave with my images. I like to leave some mystery. So there is so much. I put so much in there, but still don't resolve it clearly to just one narrative. There could be any number of possible outcomes, and leave that to the viewer to decide. Just give them enough to just wander off in their own direction and have their own story unfold based on their experience and how they interpret
Working with Matt with the videography side of things, how was that with him jumping in on the scene while you were adjusting the camera to take the next shot, trying to manage that extra element that you haven't had previously in your work?
Actually, he was pretty good. I really didn't even notice him that much. I saw him around. He was just working away without interrupting what I was doing. I think I only spoke with him maybe once or twice on the day because I was just so busy focused on this. There was a lot going on. There were a lot of things breaking down, and so a lot of challenges that kept mounting up and mounting up. Yeah, it was great to have him along. I just wish I had more time to chat with him.
Yeah, he had really good spatial awareness because when you like would run over with the smoke machines and try and get that to steam up a bit more, he'd jump in, and from my perspective, I see him come in, take some shots. I had no idea what I was expected to see, but when I got the end result, I don't even have to color grade the footage. That's how great it is. Like, he just had it all locked in. I think you wanted more smoke in the background, which we never got around to because I think we had a breeze and wind and the rest of that.
Yeah, we had a bit of a shortage of resources, both technical as far as power. Yeah, a bit of a shortage of human resources as well. We're really stretched and pressured there, and then the winds comes along and made it extraordinarily hard to keep the smoke where we needed it for long enough to get the shot. So I have to confess, there's a little bit of Photoshop created smoke just in the background, but it doesn't stand out as too obvious. It's like it's reasonable.
I think you in the traditional sense, you like everything to be within the frame. You don't like to Photoshop too much into it.
Not that great at doing the Photoshop work. I'd rather make it in the camera because it just looks real. Because I can't make it look real in Photoshop as well as photographing it for real. The process that I've learned through working in the film industry is to do it in camera, and I know how to do that.
On some of the previous stuff you've worked in the film industry, what's some of the projects you've worked on, and what was your roles on those projects?
Yeah, so I spent the first 15 years of my, call it now, 30-plus year career working as a camera assistant in film and television. So I worked on hundreds and hundreds of TV commercials, dozens of movies, dozens of Australian and American TV shows. Yeah, so I was working first of all as a clapper loader and then as a focus puller. So that's like a second assistant or first assistant to the cinematographer. And you're really right there in the thick of it, either as a clapper loader or a focus puller. You're right in that inner circle. You're there for every moment the camera rolls. You're seeing everything. You're seeing the whole thing come together. It's like a 15-year apprenticeship of learning how to be a cinematographer or director, to make film yourself. Although I never stayed on in my career to become a cinematographer, I sort of left the industry after 15 years and started shooting stills. Making this sort of work was kind of like my career, kind of like going full circle. It was like I'd had that training this first 15 years of learning how movies are made, the technical and creative process to achieve that, and then spent 15 years working as a stills photographer. And then near the end of that period, combining everything I'd learned previously and actually shooting images like they were a frame from a movie and lighting it like a movie, taking that process, slowing it down, spending all day, directing and dressing the set, lighting it, and just instead of shooting a scene which takes 40 seconds or 30 seconds, it's just one image, but that whole story of that scene or even more is told in that one image.
The creative journey usually for most people is get a DSLR, start with stills, work towards video. You were reversed. It's like you jumped right into film and TV with photography experience, but then going the other way and just focusing on a still image. It's like contrary to what most people do, isn't it?
It's exactly the opposite of what most people have done. Yeah, particularly for shooting stills. I mean, to have had a career in professional film and television before becoming a stills photographer. Yeah, you're right. Most people go about the other way around, pick up a camera and start shooting stills and then get interested in perhaps something larger and perhaps find their way into maybe the film and television industry.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm really excited about what's still yet to come for me with making these tableaus, because it really is. It's combining everything from my 30 years of experience. And really, that is just the central focus for me now for my career moving forward. This is really the only one thing now that really gets me excited photographically is just making more of these large-scale tableaus, either interior or exterior. It's this sort of work that I just want to stay focused on.
The whole process has been fascinating for me, especially like just I was so excited on the day when we're setting up, and I mean there was quite a bit of work to go in. Like I was punching in the numbers into the ground that we got from Bunnings, the tape, and it took me a bit of time to get the fake blood. Like there were some props that I handled, and then there were some props that you handled, and I think we both pulled it off. It was hard to find the right blood because it was zombie blood, which was darker, and I thought, is that going to work? Is it not? But yeah, I think we got the right stuff sorted out here. Can you dive in more and tell me a bit more about the crew?
So I had Celie there was helping me with sort of dressing the set that day, and she's also quite successful in her own right as a portrait photographer. And then I plonked her in there as the forensic photographer, as a little cameo for her. And Ralph was someone else I know from photographic circles, quite an established photographer himself, and I roped him into because I thought he had quite the look for a senior detective about ready for retirement, because he's essentially retired himself. And also had another photographer along, Matt. So I was using him as my camera operator, as it were, so that I could stay focused on the stuff on the ground and leave the technical operation of the camera to him, including all the moving that digital sensor around on the back as is needed, and firing the shot for me every time, firing the shutter.
You had the blanket over your head for your laptop so you could see what the camera could see, is that right?
Yeah, so I was just using a black sheet to help me to be able to see the tethered image that was going straight from the camera to my laptop, checking the images that come in, making sure we've got what we need on that tile of each of the 9 tiles, and then instructing Matt to move it on to the next tile position, and then capturing a few shots in that position and moving on to the next one. Yeah, so it's a slow process. I think we did 2 takes, I'm pretty sure, and if I recall, this was the first one.
Okay.
So we did the whole thing once with all the 9 tiled images. We did it again, and I think it was the first attempt that I thought was better. Hence the image we have.
If you were to take like the first round of photos we talk, and then the second round, is there ever any crossover that you can do in post-production? Like, oh, I liked this tile in the top right of this take here, but cross splice, or do you keep it isolated?
I've done that once. Usually it doesn't work because there'll be different, particularly at this time of the day, the light can be falling really quickly.
Yeah.
It can be a struggle to even get the first tile to match the exposure of the last one, because that can be a couple to several minutes between from the first one to the last one. So even ensuring that you haven't got a significant change in your ambient exposure in that time can be a challenge, let alone if you stretch it even further from, one, call it takes you 5 minutes to shoot that, and then 10 minutes later or 15 minutes later or more you're shooting another one. Quite often the exposures can be quite different. I have on one image taken a couple of elements from what was a completely different attempt and brought them into an early one and successfully used them. That was on the atonement image. I did that. Yeah, if you got a good crew, and that was the first time that I'd had Matt, so it was a really steep learning curve for him. I was yelling instructions at him, and thankfully he was actually classically trained and really quite experienced as a photographer and understanding the technical aspects of what I was calling to him. I was very grateful for having Matt there on the day. There'd be very few photographers who would have the complete understanding of all the technical elements of what was going on. It was quite a complex setup. And then you add, using flash, which are all triggered by flash radios. And I've got multiple radios on different channels and different brands. Sometimes I have lights so far away that one radio transmitter can't make it all the way from the camera to the light. So sometimes I have to transmit to another transmitter and then retransmit that to the light.
Right.
So it's like relaying it by radio. I need an assistant doing just that. Radio flash triggers when I have really large, complex lighting setups.
And I guess you want to take the images to a larger scale even more so. I mean, if you have a camera operator, then someone managing the radios, you can blow this up to a huge thing. The only thing that constricts the creativity of that after you've done it is everything's a small image now on computers and phones, and people don't really get the experience of like the full thing unless they see like a printout like you have behind you.
Yeah, so it's only when you see it on a print that scale that you really appreciate the image. I even had a couple of images in a competition, and the images they were 30 odd centimeters wide. So less than a third of the size of that image. A lot of the detail was lost because it's so small. Becomes invisible. It's only visible when it's a large print. When it's a small thing small print, or on a phone, it's just disappears. You can't even see it. It's like it's not there. And so sometimes for me, those are important parts of the narrative to help you really find the story. So that's certainly a challenge. So these two images that I had entered into this competition recently, some very experienced photographers thought that I'd done most all of it in Photoshop.
Wow.
It was all done in camera.
Wow, and they would have been like, really?
The goal that I have in mind, like from the beginning, was to make these like a painting, compose them like a painting. The process a painter goes through when making a painting, there is nothing in a painting that isn't put there by the painter. So it has a reason for being in the image.
Yeah.
Whereas photography, you find a scene and you didn't put it there, you photographed it. You didn't put each of these little things in there. You know, if you're shooting street photography or documentary, you're finding it as it is. And so quite often there can be things that you don't want that are in there, and you can't remove them short of photoshopping them and removing them out. So sometimes I have to resort to that to get them out. But the process is starting off with finding a location that has as much as possible of the things you want and as little as possible of the things you don't want.
Yeah.
And removing those things as much as possible as you can before you shoot. So there's only a very minimal number of things that you have to remove in post-production. So sometimes little signs and logos, which are just distracting. And a painter wouldn't put those things in there if it wasn't contributing to the story.
Right.
So yeah, photographic is a reductive process rather than an additive process. So I try to work like the painter, strip out everything first so that there's less for me to, to have to be reductive with, and then I can just be additive and putting the things into the shot just where I want them, how I want them, so that, yeah, it really does look like a painting.
I remember going down there a few days before we shot, and because we had a whole bunch of buckets of plaster related nonsense right there next to like where that spare tire is in the bottom left corner, and we had to like shift that across, and that's like that. I guess that's, we're removing that from the scene because it's not there aesthetically pleasing. And then like the keyboard that Celie is photographing, that was there. We just sprinkled some blood on it.
It was somewhere else.
Yeah,
it was at the back somewhere, and we pulled that forward, and I thought, well, there we go. That goes with the.
That goes with the whole
being
thing.
The musical image to accompany the musical track. Like, it just, for me, it was like, well, it was just like, that has to be in there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I sent you a video maybe a week or two later. I went down there and the council cleaned all the rubble up. It's no longer there. They cleaned it all up, and I was just amazed at like how we just got in at the right time and just captured it all.
If we left it another week, we'd be screwed. We wouldn't have this image.
Right, exactly. When we first spoke as well about collaborating, and I thought like this would be amazing to get this into a metaverse or a VR area where if someone had the goggles and you had it blown up in front of you, you could like look at the image and like, oh wow, and really spot the details. We haven't got there yet, but it's something that I still want to venture into with the image and bring it into Web3 in that sense.
I want to see how that turns out. I want to see how that, is there real potential for me to be making work that can go into the viewing experience and find an audience in that space.
Yeah, people are missing out on the viewing experience of just observing it.
Just looking at the image as a whole, you are missing out on so much.
Yeah.
Until you zoom in and go in and see that detail. So much more is discoverable there by doing that. So
if people want to contact you, how can they reach you?
Well, I've got a website, andrewrailton.com or andyrails.com. Either one will get you to the same page. You'll have my email contact address there. I'm on Instagram very occasionally, but my handle on Instagram is Andy Rails. Facebook as well, Andy Rails on Facebook.
It's been good talking to you again and connecting, and I hope everything goes well in your creative endeavors and pursuits. And I'm just excited that we've got to this point months later after doing the photography where it's out there and people can like enjoy it for themselves.